All right, Shaun Hesketh is with me. Shaun was a freelancer for 26 years before founding WP 101, which is one of the most popular WordPress tutorial sites in the world. WP 101 teaches WordPress beginners how to use WordPress to manage their websites. Shaun's also a business coach, helping entrepreneurs clarify their message so they can increase their impact. So thanks for being here, Shaun.
My pleasure, Sam. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. So you founded WP 101 in 2008, so we're approaching 10 years. But I'm wondering, did you have a profile in the WordPress community back in 2008, or has that profile grown basically just through the growth of WP 101?
That's a great question. No, I don't think I was really particularly well known in the WordPress community in 2007, 2006 and 7 when I was using WordPress as a designer to create websites for my clients. So that definitely has kind of grown organically over the years, I think. And in 2008, if you kind of look at the landscape of WordPress businesses, those of us that started in 2008, that was a really pivotal year, I think, for WordPress. So that's when we saw iThemes, Woo Themes, our site, and a bunch of others kind of came on the scene about the same time. And that's really when some kind of explosive growth began taking place. So it was a great time to enter the market. Of course, hindsight's always 2020, right? I had no idea that was going to be the case when I set out to make these WordPress tutorial videos initially, for my clients.
Yeah. So at that time, was it because it was like a smaller community? Were you in touch with like the iThemes people, the Woo Themes? Were you in touch with what later became the major players?
No, I wasn't in touch with them at that time. I idolized those guys, right? I looked up to what they were doing, and they're creating the tools that I needed, to be able to do my job. So, Brian Gardner, kind of the godfather of WordPress themes, all those kind of people that I looked up to because I was using their tools. And to today be able to count those guys as friends, certainly represents a long journey between here and there. But at that time, no, I just followed everything those guys, created and promoted, and then I was happy to use those tools.
Cool. So talk a little bit about that journey. Can you point to like one or two significant steps that you took that have contributed to the growth of WP 101?
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing that I think has been really important, back in 2008, this may seem really hard to believe, but back in 2008, when I set out to find a series of video tutorials for WordPress that would just teach kind of the basics of how to use WordPress, believe it or not, there was only one other website that had tutorial videos for WordPress, and they were already badly out of date, right? So I knew right off the bat that if I was going to create these video tutorials, one of the challenges or one of the differentiators was going to be the need to keep those up to date, right? With every WordPress release. And now, since then, I think we've updated them 20 something times, 23, 24 times, with every single update of WordPress. So I think one of the keys that I can point to is just being willing to do something that others aren't willing to do, right? Because I've had people come up to me over the years and say, man, I am so grateful that you created those tutorial videos because I thought about doing my own, but then just the task of keeping them up to date and constantly re-recording them, that was just, going to be a pain. So no way I wanted to do that. I'm so grateful that you're doing it. So it's a little bit of a labor of love, but it also is rooted in that kind of idea that you've got to be willing to do something or tackle a problem that others aren't necessarily willing or unable to tackle, right? So a mentor of mine used to say, you're paid commensurate to the size of the problems that you're willing to tackle. And I think that's one of the keys with WP 101's growth has been the fact that we're willing to tackle this very real problem, and it's a problem that's shared by a lot of people in the WordPress community.
Yeah. And so you're recording a new video for every WordPress version number, right? Are you recording it from scratch?
So we actually work from a series of scripts, which makes it easier for us to update, right? And then because of the awesome open, kind of development process, we're able to eavesdrop on the core team, in Slack and find out what areas are going to change. With most of the minor releases, we only have to update 2, 3, 4 videos, right? Mm-hmm. Just the areas that have changed. But at least once a year, anytime there's a new default theme, we re-record all the videos to take advantage of the new default theme.
Yeah.
Anytime the UI changes, we have to completely do all the videos. So at least once a year, it's all the videos. But several times a year, we're usually recording at least updates to 2 or 3 of the videos at a time.
Yeah. So do you think that quality, that the fact that you're re-recording these for every version number, do you think that almost serves as marketing, or have you figured out some different marketing channels outside of that, outside of just, pitching the quality that these are updated with every version number? Are there marketing channels that you're using to bring in people who haven't heard of WP 101?
Yeah, you bet. So those are some of the things that people point to that differentiate our videos from others. The fact that they're updated all the time, the quality. We've been touted as being the gold standard for WordPress tutorial videos, and I'm really proud of that. That's because I geek out and obsess over all the details, right? So those are important, but I wouldn't say that really does the job of marketing the videos necessarily. In the beginning, we started attending WordCamps and meeting other developers and small agencies that were facing the same challenge that we had. And that was, we've got these customers, we've just designed a WordPress site for them, we're handing the keys off, and now we need to teach them how to use WordPress so they can update their own content. So we found a lot of common ground in those WordCamps. So early on, one of our marketing channels was just attending those WordCamps anywhere we could. So initially that was our Texas WordCamps that are nearby. We're in Houston. So the Houston WordCamp, the Dallas WordCamps, Austin WordCamp. So any of those that we could get to easily. And then over the years, we kind of, extended that reach to travel all over the country and try to get to as many WordCamps as possible. So that's been really important to our marketing strategy. In the very beginning, we also paid just a ton of money. I spent a lot of money on a pay-per-click advertising, and actually paying for ads. And I don't know who it was who said that advertising is the tax you pay for, what is it? The tax you pay for being unremarkable. And I think a lot of, products kind of struggle with that in the beginning. Is like, I've created this great thing, but how do we get people to know about it? How do we cut through all the noise out there? And you could spend a tremendous amount of money, as we did, I think as much as $10,000 to $20,000 a month in AdSense arbitrage in the very beginning, just to get eyeballs on the site. And what we found is, after a few years of cultivating relationships at WordCamps, we no longer needed to pay for the pay-per-click advertisements. We're able to eliminate that expense and just go about building relationships. And there's much more ROI with that.
When you were going to these WordCamps, were you just, walking up and meeting people one-on-one, or were you speaking at them? I mean, how are you building the relationships at WordCamps? It seems like that's been an effective marketing channel for you, but if you're an introvert visiting these WordCamps, how can you use them as a marketing channel?
So I totally relate to that. First of all, I've been accused of being a high-functioning introvert myself, right? So I get that, and it's a lot easier to go to those events and kind of just blend in. I actually, even though I've done a good bit of public speaking, I have yet to speak at a WordCamp. So generally when we go, we try to sponsor, at least at a small level. And so that gives us an opportunity to meet some people out of the box. But yeah, some of it's about just kind of doing the uncomfortable thing and walking up and asking people what they're working on, and what's their biggest challenge, what are they struggling with, and just initiating conversations by showing an interest about other people, right? So that's always been my strategy, is try to reach out to the speakers who are there, other attendees. In some cases, a question might be asked during the Q&A at the end of a session, and I can follow up with that person later and say, hey, it's a really interesting question. Here's a couple of resources that I've found. Not necessarily even about my product.
Right.
In a lot of cases, just about demonstrating that you're helpful. And then people want to know, well, who are you and what are you working on? And so it kind of, engenders that reciprocity, right? So I think that's the best way to tackle those types of events when you're introverted, is just to ask questions.
Yeah.
Instead of leading with, here's who I am and what amazing thing I'm working on.
Right.
Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that guy.
So let's talk a little bit about the courses. So I have a course myself, and one thing that I've struggled with is kind of making the connection last beyond the course. So someone takes the course and, I want to know, was it useful? Which parts weren't, which parts should I add to? Should I explain better? Which parts were maybe just not as helpful. What are you doing to connect with your students that, are taking the course but then might just kind of, fall off into the ether?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, you're tapping into one of my greatest passion projects, I think. And that is, I think in general, the state of online courses right now is really sad. It's this experience where you pay some money and you're thrown into, a site that has a stack of videos or some text content or some downloadable resource. It's just you and this material. And it's really easy, I think, for a lot of online courses to just feel like you're in a ghost town. And you wonder, is anyone else even doing this at the same time as me? Is anyone else where I am struggling with the things I'm struggling with? So I'm actually spending a lot of time and effort into, first of all, studying how people learn best, but primarily increasing that kind of human touch, like you're talking about, the human touch throughout the course. So one of the mistakes, I think, is to only hit them at the end. I think it's important to kind of have touch points throughout the course. So the software that powers WP 101 is Lifter LMS, and it's a phenomenal learning management system plugin. One of the reasons why I chose that plugin is because they have this cool feature called engagements. And engagements allow me to send off targeted emails to a student whenever, throughout a course, whenever they achieve a milestone or they finish watching a particular lesson. So what we use that for is if there's a topic that we know is particularly challenging or could be confusing, we'll send off an email and say, hey, I saw you just completed, that lesson. Do you have any questions? Because that can be a really confusing topic. So by increasing the touch points throughout the course, it makes it easier for us to actually have those ongoing conversations with a student. They don't feel they're in a ghost town. They know somebody's there. And if we're having those communications throughout the course, it makes it easier for me to find out at the end, did you get what you came for? Did you learn something? And was it helpful? And that's my biggest question, because I want to know that the stuff we create is actually helping somebody get from point A to point B, right? And so, that's the best way that I found to kind of nurture that.
Do you have numbers on that? Like, do you know the numbers offhand? Like, out of how many students that you're sending this email to about a specific lesson, how many are responding? What's the percentage?
It's a low percentage, I can tell you that. So we send those off to every student who makes their way through any of our courses. We have different engagements created for each of the courses. And yet I can tell you there's a very small number of people who actually take the time to reply and respond. So, that's why this is a passion project of mine, because I'm going, okay, I know this is not the best learning experience. What else can we do to improve that? And if it's not, via an email, which, by the way, is a very personal email. It's not a WP 101 branded email. It's just, hey, it's Shawn, just checking in on you, seeing how you're doing. The signature is just for me. It's intended to be a real personal kind of touch point, but that's not the language that everyone speaks. So there has to be more that we can do to improve that, and that's one of my passions.
Yeah. So you have a forum as well. Has that been like previously what you were trying to use to accomplish that goal, and has it been successful in that, or are you thinking of like moving that to Facebook, or completely, removing that and using these emails instead?
Yeah. So yeah, we did use the question and answer forum, which is still in place. And we consider that one of the best benefits to becoming a member is you have access to be able to ask your WordPress questions at any time via this Q&A forum. But to be honest, again, very few people do that. And I think it's just because nobody wants to be the person who asks the dumb question, right? And the truth is there aren't any dumb questions. And we've answered hundreds and hundreds of very basic, very simple questions that a lot of people have. But it's getting over that hurdle. And so a lot of people just aren't going to use that medium. So that's why we kind of have a combination approach. So we do have a Facebook page. We do have, it's not a private member-only group, but we take, conversations that take place there. We have the Q&A forum for some people who are comfortable using that type of communication medium. We have the emails. So with all of that, I think you're speaking the language of the student, of the customer. And whatever language they want to use, I want to make sure that we have a channel open for that, because ultimately that's what will kind of create that more human learning experience. It's missing from online courses.
I think that's an important distinction that you're making, is like some people will probably only respond to an email because they don't want to be asking these questions in public, because they don't want everyone else looking at the question to be like, oh, what a stupid question. Obviously it's X, Y, and Z, even
Exactly.
though most likely there are tons of other people who have the same question. But yeah, it's a good point that you should kind of be using at least two channels, one for people who don't want to ask their questions publicly, and one for people who are okay with the community aspect of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I do feel like sending members in a course off to a Facebook group can be a little counterproductive. And so I know people who have done this, and it kind of just devolves into, conversation about who knows what, and all over the map. It's a little bit harder to have targeted conversations about your course specifically. So I would prefer tools that keep that on site. But again, it's going to ultimately be about facilitating conversations using whatever tool, works best. If it's a high tech course, then it could be that Slack is the best channel, and your, students may, if they're already using Slack, they may find that that's a really comfortable place to ask questions and answers. In our case, that would just represent another piece of software that a beginner to web publishing has to learn to be able to communicate. So we've chosen not to use Slack specifically for that reason.
Yeah, you don't want to add another tech hurdle.
That's right. Here's more things to learn.
So you're saying kind of meeting people in their language, and that brings up an important kind of focus that you've had in the last couple of years, which is translating your videos into different languages. And I think right now you have closed captioning, and maybe you have some recorded videos in Spanish, if I'm...
Yeah, it gets a little confusing, doesn't it? So over the years, we've tried several different things to bring the videos into other languages. So right now we have our videos closed caption, and then those captions are also translated into Spanish subtitles, which makes it easy to deliver the content into other languages, particularly where English is maybe a second language, and you can still make sense of what's being shown on screen, and the subtitles just help to reinforce what's being said. We did attempt a few years ago to create a completely separate version of the site in which everything was translated to Spanish, so the entire learning experience from start to finish, including all the videos, was created in Spanish. And the amount of time and effort and resources we had to find a translation partner who not only knew WordPress, but also knew how to teach it and could take our scripts and materials that already existed and translate every piece of that into Spanish to create them. And at the end of the day, the market just wasn't there. We didn't have enough students sign up to really support the work of that translation partner. And so that was a difficult kind of experiment. I still think it's the best way to deliver it, but we've opted to kind of do what we can do, at least to kind of bridge the gap for the time being. My mentor used to say, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly, meaning, sometimes the best thing is the thing you can do right now, right? So, so that's why we're just translating the captions into subtitles, and we'd like to bring those into other languages as there's demand, as we know that they're going to get used. It's difficult to track the metrics on who's actually accessing those subtitles.
Yeah.
So while we can track metrics on video plays and completion rates, we can't really see who's actually using the closed captions, who's actually using, how many of our members are actually using the subtitles. And so that would be some great data to have that would help us to know, is this worthwhile? Is it really helping?
Right. So if you were going to go back to recording videos in a different language, would you accompany that with a marketing campaign in that language? I mean, why do you think that it wasn't as successful? You have this very successful business in English, at least. Yeah. Why do you think it wasn't successful in Spanish?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we've wrestled with that. In fact, we've asked some very, very smart people to look at it and say, here's what we did. Where did we drop the ball? Because we had a lot of requests for the course in Spanish. It was our top requested language. But once we released it to the sound of crickets. And so we've kind of tried to unpack that and figure out what might have made that go better. The best thing that I can point to is that we just didn't have the same presence on the ground, so to speak, like in those local WordCamps. We had some, but in local WordCamps, I think it's the relationship building. And it's difficult. That takes time. There's no shortcut to that. You can't just put it out there without spending tens of thousands of dollars on pay-per-click advertising like we did with WP 101. What we enjoy today in terms of brand recognition and kind of the market. I wouldn't say saturation, but the effectiveness that we've had in the WordPress community is the product of nearly 10 years of relationship building. So there is no shortcut to that. And so really to be effective, I think in other languages, that means other countries and actually having those same relationships in place. So at the time being, we just don't have those types of resources to be everywhere like we would like to be right now. But hopefully at some point in the future, we can do that.
Isn't that always the case? So I listened to an episode of the Matt Report podcast that you were on, and there was one thing that you said that stuck out to me, which is you don't subscribe to the idea that there's only so much pie, and instead you have this mindset of abundance. And I'm wondering if in that mindset you're reaching out to other people in the same space and trying to build partnerships with them, or is it more just like, it's fine, it's friendly competition, maybe there are people that come to me and I think, oh, well, this competing product is maybe better for your use case. So is it the friendly competition, or is it actual building partnerships?
Yes to both, right? So in some cases, it's that kind of co-opetition, a little friendly competition in the WordPress space where, some friends of mine, like Troy Dean, for example, has video user manuals, which has some competition with our own WP 101 plugin. But we're going about it in different ways. So it's a slightly different feature set. And so in some cases, I'm more than happy to send a customer to his product and vice versa if we feel that's a better fit. So that's an example, I would say, of that kind of co-opetition. And I don't think any of the work that either of us have done on our products has really, adversely affected the other product. We haven't taken away market share from the other person necessarily. In other cases, there are some phenomenal WordPress educators, in our space. And so I think of Zach Gordon, for example, Bob Dunn, Bob WP, Joe Casabona, and there some of these WordPress educators are doing their own things, and we're happy to promote the courses and educational resources that they're creating where there's not overlap. What we're trying to do now is to create partnerships where we can actually host some of their courses on our site for our members. And so in those cases, we'll be looking for opportunities to partner and collaborate. And because we're really trying to serve beginners, we have this kind of 101 or very basic level of content. I have no problem then, sending somebody, once they've outgrown our content, they understand the basics, now they're ready to dive in and do something more advanced with a little bit of information. I can send them to one of those course creators who might have a more advanced set of courses that might serve them for their journey down the road.
Have you ever reached out to someone in the same space to form one of these partnerships and they say, no, you're my competition, I'm not going to work with you? Like, have you ever had to overcome that hurdle?
Not to date. So, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But so far, no. I think, again, part of the benefit of being in the space as long as we have is that a lot of people know and recognize the work that we've done, respect this challenge of the WP 101 kind of WordPress tutorials for the beginning set. So there's not really a lot of people who want to come into that and compete. Just don't want to do that work, right? Yeah. So what they want to do is the things that they're really passionate about, which usually come further downstream. So there's not really a lot of reason to say no because there's so much room for us to collaborate. There's so much education that needs to be done. And even if somebody were doing the exact same thing as we were, you're going to do it in a different way with a different voice and go about it in a different way that's going to resonate with a particular audience that's not ours. Mm-hmm. So I still feel that there's plenty of pie.
Plenty of pie. Another thing that I want to talk to you about is your Twitter account. So I have to admit that I am terrible at social media. Part of that is because I can't really understand why people love it so much. But you seem to have figured it out for the WP 101 account. You have over 50,000 followers. Is that just a byproduct of people taking your course, or is that a channel that you're focusing on?
We do focus on that. I have two strategies with the WP 101 Twitter account. One is to Obviously, whenever we release new courses, we use that to announce that new material. But it's not the primary purpose of that channel. The primary purpose of that channel is to provide news and updates. There are a lot of people who subscribe to WP 101 because we tend to aggregate some of the news and announcements about WordPress that come from multiple channels. And so some people subscribe to WP 101 because we take the best of that and help users know here's something that you need to be aware of. If it's a security hack or a security breach and there's an article on security, then we want to send them to those resources. And if there's a new update to WordPress software, whether it's WordPress.org or WordPress.com, instead of following all these different accounts, a lot of people choose to follow WP 101 and get all that information in one channel. So I primarily, the strategy for the WP 101 account is to, first of all, provide value, but also just to shine the spotlight on what other people are doing. Mm-hmm. So when there's a very innovative product or plugin or theme that comes into the space, that's our opportunity to introduce people to those types of resources. And so that's a real value and probably the biggest reason why people choose to follow that account.
Yeah. So are you tweeting, are you tweeting on certain hashtag topics and tweeting at people, and do you think that that's part of your growth, or is it really just that you're tweeting stuff that is, people are now identifying WP 101 as a resource for WordPress news, and so they're just following you no matter what? Is there like a strategy in there within the specifics of the tweet composition, or is it just?
Sure. In the early days, we talked about the WordCamps and attending, those types of conferences. In the early days of trying to promote that account, when we attended a conference, we would take pictures of the presenters and kind of summarize what they're talking about, some of their key takeaways, and then send that out on our account. And so in doing that, we're trying to provide some value to people who aren't able to attend the event. In the case of taking photographs of presenters, which we still do, that's helpful to the presenter who might enjoy taking that photograph and using it elsewhere. So we're trying to provide some value, but that gives you an opportunity to do a lot of concentrated content within the context of a weekend where you've got hundreds and hundreds of people who are going to become familiar with your account, but also retweet and help kind of spread that information. So that gives you kind of an opportunity to those are boost weekends, right? Because you're producing a lot of content in a weekend that you normally wouldn't do. That could just be channel saturation and people would mute you, right? So in the context of a WordCamp where you're able to do something like that that's helpful and provides some value, then it's not offensive and people choose to follow that kind of information. I think of David Bissett, who's a good friend. Dimension Media is his Twitter handle. Now, if you follow David, whether he's watching the live stream for a WordCamp that he's not even attending, man, he's tweeting out 3-4 takeaways for every speaker. And the guy just is in touch with what's happening across the WordPress space. So his personal account is one that I follow because he just cranks out so much great content. So, being helpful, it's not necessarily a hashtag strategy, except that at those conferences, we're often using the hashtag of the conference to make sure that's in the particular stream of that event. But on a regular basis, it's less of a hashtag strategy and more of a just being helpful. That's exactly what our focus is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a common refrain. Just help.
Well, let's be frank too. I mean, once you get to a certain number of followers, Twitter helps, right? So the more followers you have, the more likely they are to promote your content to people who have an interest in WordPress, for example. They're like, hey, you may be interested in following this account. You're going to get more recommendations the more followers you get. So there's a good ROI on that as you continue to build the audience.
And the snowball effect.
Exactly, that snowball effect. So Twitter definitely helps in that regard. So going from 10 to 50 was a lot easier than going from 0 to 10. Yeah. So you just have to stick with it.
Yep. All right, well, we are coming up on a half hour, so going to wrap this up soon, but what's one thing that you're excited to try next to grow your influence and your audience?
Let me have a log jam. Lots of things, but let me just hit this one thing that I think has probably been the biggest key, and this is something that I see overlooked because today I find out about lots and lots of new products and plugins, and whether it's through my coaching channel where I've got people reaching out and asking for help in launching their product or taking their product to the next level, or they just want help. They want WP 101 to promote their WordPress product. I see some kind of common errors, and I know you probably see these as well, but I get blasted all the time with these emails from somebody who's created some great content, maybe an infographic, something that they think is helpful, and they're asking for a link, right? So, hey, it's the standard format that we see all the time, and it's, I saw this page on your website, and without knowing anything else about who you are, I've done some research and found out, this is the silent conversation. I've done some research and found out that I want to have a link on that page to my content is what it boils down to. So would you just put a link to my infographic on your page? No, of course not. I don't know you. And so the biggest key that I would say in terms of becoming an influencer or spreading that kind of content and raising your profile is it really boils down to just the principle of reciprocity, right? It's doing things that probably don't scale, but doing things for other people to help shine a spotlight on them. And it's as simple as this. Look, if I open the door for you, then the next time we come to a door, you're going to probably return the favor, because the truth is no one likes to feel indebted to somebody else, right? And you're also more inclined to do favors for people who've done a favor for you. So I am much more inclined to at least have a conversation and learn about your product and plug in and consider putting that in our list of resources for our members. If you've already done a good job of telling your audience about WP 101. And so this idea of kind of engendering reciprocity to me that's the ongoing strategy. The thing I'm doing next is the same thing that I've been doing for the last 9 years. And that is finding people in the community that I can shine a spotlight on who are doing cool things. And then I do that through social media. I make a point of seeing them in person at these events and finding out, just asking questions. What are you working on? What are you doing? And then I'm using my channels and my resources to shine a spotlight on that person. Why is that important? Because then when I get ready to release my next course or product, those are the very people who will then turn around and help spread the word for us. So it's less of this kind of cold sell thing, and it's more about put a little thought and effort into the people, the influencers who can also benefit you and your company, help raise your profile. But it comes from first serving. I think if you set out first to be an influencer, you're just going to get lost in the noise. To be honest, it's a turnoff. And I'm inclined to just hit delete on those emails, right? But if it's somebody who's reaching out to ask, what's your biggest challenge with WP 101? Oh, I can tell you. Let me tell you the 3 or 4 things that we're working on next. And if you have something to contribute to that, then I want to be able to return the favor and shine a spotlight on you as well. So that's kind of an ongoing strategy, right? That's the thing that we're working on all the time.
So would you actually respond to that email if someone emailed you like, "Hey, what are you working on? How can I help?" Would you actually respond to that email and say, "Here are some things"?
Absolutely, because I'm constantly looking for people who can help us overcome some of the challenges that we're facing, right? So I've had people reach out and say, "Hey, I might be interested in partnering with you to bring your videos into Italian or into French." That's a person who shows that they've paid attention to what I'm putting out there. They understand that this is a challenge that we face, and they've got a solution. It may just be an introduction, right? It could be as simple as, I know you're working on this thing, and I've got a friend or another company or product that could help solve that problem for you. Can I make an introduction? That's valuable to me. So I will absolutely respond to those emails. And that's the biggest way, I think, to get the attention of an influencer. Instead of going in with a megaphone and say, let me tell you about the cool thing that I'm creating, it's more about asking some questions. And if you do that, I'll take the time to share that. And I think most of the people that I know absolutely will do the same thing. So it comes down to engendering reciprocity. That's the goal, right? So, and then in those conversations, we'll talk about the things that we're doing next.
Cool. I know you're coming out with a new version of the plugin, so I want to just give you an opportunity to tell us about that a little bit before we end.
So speaking of things we're working on next, we're really excited about the new version of the WP 101 plugin, and that was created several years ago, actually in response to needs that were addressed by the community, right? So we had other friends of ours who were developers and said, "Hey, we love your WordPress tutorial videos, but what would be really great is if we could provide those in the dashboard for our clients. So our clients can log into their own WordPress dashboard and see, your video tutorials right there in the dashboard. So we created the WP 101 plugin just to serve that audience. Well, we've just finished or are wrapping up a complete rewrite of that entire plugin that's going to also give developers and agencies the ability to manage the sites on which the plugin is installed, to deploy custom videos across multiple client sites at the same time. So we'll have a dashboard in which you can kind of manage all of your client sites and then provide that kind of training directly in the client's dashboard. So it's a complete rewrite from the ground up, and we're really excited to bring that to market. Probably by the end of the month, we'll be releasing that.
So you're saying that design agencies will be able to add their own videos into the list of videos of the plugin from a centralized management dashboard.
The current version of the WP 101 plugin allows you to add your own custom videos to the list of video tutorials right there in the dashboard. But it's done on a per site basis, and it has to be done on the individual site. But if you're managing dozens or even hundreds of websites, you don't want to do that over and over and over again times all of your clients, right? So this new version will have a proper dashboard on our site that you'll be able to log into and manage visibility of those tutorials that we provide, and also add custom videos and then deploy those across all your customer sites if you want to. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so we're really excited about that. It represents a significant evolution and addresses one of the biggest questions that we've gotten in recent years about the WP 101 plugin. So yeah, so that'll be out by the end of the year.
Will you still be able to push a single video to one site, or if you're okay?
You sure can. And that's a popular application, right? The biggest application for custom videos is covering specific functionality that you might have created just for this one client, right? Yeah. So if you've created a video tutorial that just covers that specific functionality, and a lot of our WP 101 plugin subscribers do this, then you can still just push that out to one client site if you want to.
Cool.
So yep, you'll have all kinds of options and flexibility.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you joining us. So if people want to find you and ask you how they can help you, where can they find you?
I blog at ShawnHesketh.com. That's also my coaching site. You can follow me at Left Lane on Twitter, and I'm also on Facebook and all those good things. And of course, WP101.com is the primary source where you can find our courses and tutorials and all the news about that. And our Twitter handle that you mentioned is at WP101.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sam.